Portable TV. Come watch with me. And top international diplomats are in Vienna today trying to figure out a path forward to save the dying JCPOA, better known as the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. But U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price told press the maximalist demands are not going to get us anywhere. That as Iranian officials refuse to meet face-to-face with their American counterparts unless and until President Joe Biden overturns the sanctions placed on their country by former President Trump. This message coming from a Chinese and Russian delegation tasked with mediating the talks as the U.S. met with European counterparts. Former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer turned UN weapons inspector and contributor to RT.com, Scott Ritter, joined me to discuss.
Right now, the Biden administration has dramatically changed its policy formulation regarding Iran. If Joe Biden during the campaign may have said he wanted to rejoin the JCPOA, but his Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, and even the president himself started piling condition after condition upon this return, including the notion of lengthening and strengthening the Iran nuclear deal, linking it to Iran's ballistic missile program, linking it to Iran's so-called malign regional behavior, bringing in Israel and Saudi Arabia and other nations as members. This was unacceptable to the Iranians. They said, no, the original deal or no deal. And now Biden has come around and said the original deal. They both sides are in agreement. They want all the sanctions that were lifted in the original agreement must be lifted again, and Iran will return to fully being compliant with the agreement. Both sides agree this is the outcome that is desired. How they get there is another question. Iran wants the United States to lift all sanctions right now, and then it will come into compliance. The United States wants to have some sort of phased approach. My guess is that the Iranian position will be the one that prevails at the end of the day, because it is very important for the Biden administration to save this deal before conservatives come into power in Iran in May with a new presidential election.
Yeah, good point. But Scott, it is worth reminding the viewers that it was the U.S. who originally broke from the deal to begin with. The U.S. unanimously withdrawing from the JCPOA under Trump and then turning around and levying sanctions on Iran when they followed suit. So given the U.S. hypocrisy here, I mean, is it really unreasonable that Tehran has no trust in Washington?
No, absolutely not. The United States has not shown itself to be a nation capable of negotiating in good faith for many administrations. The Obama administration, the Trump administration, now the Biden administration have not been good negotiators. But for the Iranians, they know this. I mean, if you take a look at the Iranian internal domestic dialogue about this, they know the United States can't be trusted. But it is imperative for their national survival that they get these sanctions lifted. And this is their last chance to do so. So they're not having direct negotiations with the United States, but they are negotiating with the other members of the JCPOA. The United States is sitting in as an observer, and it is interfacing with its allies, the European Union, Germany, France, Great Britain, get its point across. At the end of the day, I believe it's in both sides' best interest to have the United States return, have these sanctions lifted, and have Iran come back into full compliance with its obligations. But you're right. Iran doesn't trust the United States, nor should it. But it trusts the deal that was negotiated, and that's what they're trying to get back to.
Yeah, you have a positive outlook on what's happening there. I was taking it the other way, that perhaps they weren't meeting face-to-face because they didn't want to play ball. It sounds like your assessment is they will, because this is the only ball anyone has, I guess. And lastly, Scott, perhaps the biggest legacy, I think, left by Trump is that the U.S. resorts to sanctions to achieve whatever its policy goals are rather than diplomacy. There are many states out there in the world who are calling for a temporary truce of sorts, a lifting of sanctions until the world gets through this pandemic. The Biden administration doesn't seem to be showing signs of that, not towards Iran, not towards Venezuela, Cuba, and so forth. But by doling out sanctions like this, have we kind of painted ourselves into a corner?
Well, we always have. Look, sanctions have never worked in modern history. The one time that sanctions did work was against South Africa about apartheid, and that's because they sanctioned a ruling minority who felt the pain. But generally speaking, governments and the people they rule come together when they're sanctioned. We saw that with Iraq. We saw that with Iran. We've seen that in Russia and China. Any nation sanctioned by the United States only strengthens the resolve of that nation to stand up and oppose what the United States is doing. So the United States has painted itself into a corner. And I don't see the Biden administration nor any American administration walking away from the sanctions tool because it's the lazy man's tool. It's cheap diplomacy. You don't have to work. You just sanction. And that's what they're going to do. I mean, you'll see, even if they come back to the JCPOA and lift the sanctions that were supposed to be lifted, you'll see that the Biden administration will seek to find new venues to sanction Iran outside of the framework of the JCPOA. This is what the Obama administration did, and this is what made the Iranians angry, is that this is not supposed to happen. But the United States doesn't care about the rule of law or agreements. They only care about furthering American national security prerogatives. In this case, the prerogative is that Iran's nuclear program must be constrained by any means possible.
Yeah, we should also mention on our way out here that it is not a Trump policy. It is not a Biden policy. This is American foreign policy. Scott Ritter, always appreciate your take. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.